The Silicon Valley ballroom fell into a chilling silence the moment a billionaire's arrogant laughter was cut short by a 10-year-old waitress's daughter. Julian Vane, a titan who believed his wealth made him untouchable, stood sneering at a child he considered invisible among polished boots and crystal chandeliers. He had just used a sharp, degrading Japanese phrase to humiliate the girl's mother, certain his elite language was a wall no commoner could ever climb. But when an ancient document surfaced, filled with secrets no one else could untangle, all eyes turned to her. Some laughed, others doubted. One man even sneered, ready to watch her fail. But what they didn't know was that Miller had been listening all her life, listening more closely than anyone ever imagined. As her quiet, steady voice began to speak, the room froze, for she wasn't just reading, she was decoding a trillion-dollar fraud that would bankrupt Vane before the sun rose. Just a quick little pause before the truth unfolds. If you love stories where the underdog wins and justice finally prevails, please leave a like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. If you're new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss tomorrow's special video, as I guarantee you won't want to miss the evidence that brings him down. Now let's jump back to the moment the billionaire froze. The light from the skyscrapers in San Jose does not reach the dilapidated apartment of the Miller mother and daughter. Inside the cramped space, the air is thick with the smell of cheap laundry detergent and the metallic groan of an overworked radiator. Sarah Miller drops her keys onto a scratched laminate counter, her shoulders slumped after enduring a brutal 12-hour shift at the Julian Vane estate. Her uniform is stiff with dried sweat and spills from serving the Silicon Valley elite, while her swollen feet throb inside worn black slip-resistant shoes. She leans against the sink for a long moment, massaging the angry red blisters on her hands that come from carrying scalding silver trays and scrubbing crystal glasses until they shine like diamonds. This crumbling sanctuary costs her nearly every dollar of her minimum wage paycheck and meager tips, leaving absolutely nothing for medical bills or a proper day of rest. Maya Miller watches her mother from the narrow hallway, a 10-year-old girl who moves through the shadows with the silent grace of a ghost. The child knows better than to make a sound or demand attention when Sarah returns in this state of total physical depletion. Instead, Maya carefully takes the heavy canvas bag from her mother's hands, uncovering the plastic containers of leftover caviar and artisan breads that Sarah managed to smuggle out of the billionaire's kitchen. These scraps from the high society tables are the only gourmet meals the young girl has ever known, serving as a stark reminder of the immense chasm dividing their reality from the one her mother caters to. Maya is a quiet observer of this brutal American wealth gap, spending her days completely invisible among the wealthy guests who discuss venture capital while carelessly stepping over the working class. She has spent countless hours peeking through the swinging kitchen doors of the grand mansion, studying the careless arrogance of the tech titans and the casual cruelty hidden behind their polished smiles. The girl remembers the sharp, commanding tone of Julian Vane as he ordered the staff around like indentured servants, his voice echoing with the absolute certainty of a man who believes his net worth makes him a god. To the men in those bespoke suits, the catering staff are nothing more than background noise, easily replaced and entirely disposable. Sarah forces a tired smile for her daughter, trying to mask the deep exhaustion etching permanent lines into her young face, but Maya sees right through the brave facade. The 10-year-old understands that her silence is a necessary shield in a world that routinely crushes the vulnerable, allowing her to absorb every detail of the opulent estate without ever drawing dangerous attention to herself. As they sit at the wobbly kitchen table, eating the cold gourmet leftovers. The distant rumble of the California highway hums through the thin walls, contrasting sharply with the dead silence inside their apartment. Maya carefully wipes the kitchen counter, her small hands moving with a practiced efficiency that mirrors her mother's endless labor, while her sharp mind processes the deep injustices she witnesses every single day. She watches Sarah finally fall asleep, sitting up on the thrift store sofa, still wearing her stained white apron, utterly defeated by the relentless demands of survival in the wealthiest zip code in the country. The glaring neon glow from the distant tech campuses bleeds through their cheap plastic blinds, illuminating the harsh truth that the American dream is often built on the invisible broken backs of people exactly like her quiet mother. When the city falls asleep, Maya lights a small candle in the damp basement. The flickering golden flame reveals towering stacks of heavy cardboard boxes filled with the only inheritance her family possesses. The musty scent of aging paper and dried ink fills the enclosed space, offering a strange comfort that contrasts sharply with the sterile mansions her mother cleans. Inside these worn containers lie hundreds of ancient Japanese manuscripts and fragile silk scrolls that once belonged to Arthur Miller. Her grandfather was a brilliant Orientalist scholar who spent decades decoding Eastern philosophies for a prestigious coastal university. His academic career abruptly ended when he refused to validate a forged historical document pushed by influential university donors seeking to claim contested overseas properties. The elite board of directors quietly destroyed his reputation and forced him into early retirement to protect their lucrative financial interests. Arthur lost his position, but managed to salvage his extensive personal library before the institution completely erased his legacy. He spent his final years sitting in this exact subterranean room with his young granddaughter by his side. Maya carefully pulls a thick leather-bound volume from the bottom crate and gently traces the faded kanji characters embossed on the cover. Arthur did not teach her this complex foreign language, so she could recite beautiful poetry or impress wealthy patrons at dinner parties. Instead, he used the intricate strokes of Edo period calligraphy to explain the mechanics of human deception. He showed her how powerful men often hide their darkest intentions behind the most elegant vocabulary. Every lesson was a rigorous exercise in seeing through sophisticated lies and understanding the vast difference between what is spoken and what is actually meant. The old scholar instilled in her the profound realization that mastery over words provides immunity against manipulation. Maya opens the fragile pages and begins reading a complex tactical treatise written centuries ago by a legendary strategist. She studies the phonetic nuances, the hidden double meanings embedded within the archaic grammar structure, and the cultural context behind every phrase. Her intense dedication to this obscure subject matter stems purely from a primal instinct to survive in a hostile environment designed to keep people like her trapped at the bottom. The 10-year-old comprehends that while the billionaires upstairs wield money as a weapon, she must forge her own armor out of undeniable intellect. She memorizes syntax patterns and translates complicated geopolitical theories until her eyes burn from the strain of reading in the terrible lighting. There is no desire for academic recognition or childhood vanity driving her relentless focus. Knowledge is simply the only currency the elite cannot confiscate from her mind. The damp concrete walls offer no comfort, but the wisdom radiating from the parchment provides a deep sense of security that physical wealth could never match. She practices her pronunciation silently, forming the difficult syllables without letting a single breath escape her lips. Arthur had warned her that revealing her intelligence prematurely would only invite dangerous retaliation from those who fear losing control over their carefully maintained hierarchy. Therefore, she embraces her role as an unseen phantom, absorbing thousands of vocabulary words, while the rest of California dreams of venture capital funding. The wax slowly melts down the side of the candle, casting long, dancing shadows across the countless rows of classical literature. Maya finally closes the heavy cover and returns the text to its designated protective sleeve. She extinguishes the small flame and sits in the absolute darkness, feeling entirely equipped to face whatever carefully constructed falsehoods the upcoming morning will inevitably bring. The private auction begins with the appearance of Julian Vane and his forged contracts. The grand ballroom of the estate is transformed into a sanctuary of immense wealth where tech titans and venture capitalists gather to bid on exclusive technological patents. Waitstaff weave through the crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with crystal flutes of imported champagne. Sarah Miller navigates the polished marble floor with practiced caution, ensuring not a single drop spills from her heavy load. She keeps her tired eyes cast downward, moving invisibly among the bespoke suits and glittering diamond necklaces. Julian stands at the center of the room, surrounded by eager investors, hanging onto his every word. He brandishes a leather folder containing documents promising revolutionary returns while radiating an aura of absolute invincibility. His charismatic facade masks a ruthless predator who enjoys asserting his dominance over those he considers beneath his social standing. Maya stands near the heavy velvet curtains separating the catering prep area from the main floor, watching the scene unfold with intense focus. She studies the body language of the powerful men, noting the subtle arrogance in their posture and the condescending tone of their negotiations. Julian requires a momentary distraction to successfully deflect a probing question from a skeptical foreign buyer regarding the financial projections of his latest enterprise. He notices Sarah approaching his circle to clear empty glasses from a nearby cocktail table. With a calculated flick of his wrist, he deliberately swings his arm backward just as she passes behind him. The sudden impact sends the silver tray crashing to the ground, shattering fragile crystals and sending a tidal wave of dark red wine splashing across Sarah's pristine white uniform. Gasps ripple through the immediate vicinity as the investors step back to protect their expensive shoes from the spreading stain. Sarah immediately drops to her knees, frantically using her bare hands and a small cloth to soak up the mess while repeatedly apologizing for a mistake she did not commit. Her cheeks burn with intense humiliation as the cold liquid seeps through her clothing, soaking her skin. Julian looks down at the kneeling woman with an expression of theatrical pity, masking deep contempt. He clicks his tongue loudly, drawing the attention of everyone in the immediate circle to the pathetic display on the floor. To further amuse his wealthy peers and establish his cosmopolitan superiority, Julian decides to weaponize his linguistic skills. He casually adjusts his silk tie and delivers a string of harsh, degrading Japanese sentences directly aimed at the trembling waitress. He utilizes a highly specific and archaic feudal-era dialect intended to equate her with untouchable dirt fit only to be trampled upon by noblemen. The harsh syllables cut through the ambient jazz music, carrying a venomous weight that requires no translation to understand its malicious intent. A few of the international businessmen chuckle nervously, while others simply smirk at the casual display of cruelty. Julian confidently switches back to English, loudly declaring that the lower working class in this country possesses absolutely no culture or intellect. He boasts that the woman scrubbing the floor probably assumes he just offered her a profound blessing or a generous compliment regarding her miserable work ethic. He revels in the absolute certainty that in this fortress of Silicon Valley, money no impoverished servant could ever decipher the elite vocabulary he just used to strip away her remaining dignity. From her concealed vantage point behind the velvet draping, Maya hears every single precise pronunciation. Her small fists clench tightly at her sides as she processes the sophisticated syntax meant to completely break her mother. The young girl watches Sarah endure the agonizing public shaming without raising her head. The overwhelming arrogance of the billionaire ignites a quiet fire within the child, prompting her to finally step out from the comforting safety of the shadows to confront the ultimate source of their misery. Maya's small footsteps echoed on the marble floor, cutting through Julian Vane's triumphant laughter. The 10-year-old girl stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtains and walked directly toward the center of the elite gathering. She gently grasped her mother's trembling arm, pulling Sarah up from the wine-soaked ground. Maya stood squarely in front of the towering billionaire with an unnerving calm that defied her young age and ragged clothing. She looked directly into his eyes and spoke in flawless English, translating the exact archaic feudal insult he had just delivered. She announced to the entire circle of international investors that he had just called her mother an untouchable peasant whose only purpose was to absorb the dirt from his shoes. The nervous chuckles from the surrounding businessmen instantly died as the ugly reality of his joke was laid bare in plain language. Julian stiffened as his sophisticated facade cracked under the steady gaze of a child. Before he could formulate a defensive response, Maya shifted her attention to the open leather folder resting on the adjacent cocktail table. She pointed a small finger at the prominent Japanese calligraphy printed on the cover of his highly touted investment prospectus. She looked up at the circle of potential buyers and addressed them with formal politeness, referring to them as sir and madam, while dismantling the entire presentation. With clinical precision, she informed the venture capitalists that the billionaire was actively misrepresenting his trillion-dollar digitalization project. Maya explained that the specific kanji characters he employed did not guarantee perpetual digital ownership, as he had proudly claimed just moments ago. Instead, the archaic financial terminology actually translated to a temporary corporate lease that could be unilaterally revoked at any time without paying a single cent of compensation to the foreign investors. She detailed how he had completely butchered the grammatical structure using a peasant dialect variation that entirely altered the legal meaning of the proposed binding contracts. The foreign buyers who had been nodding along previously now exchanged alarmed glances, realizing they were moments away from funding a massive linguistic and financial trap. Julian turned crimson, ordering the catering manager to immediately remove the insolent child from the premises. However, a deep authoritative voice suddenly commanded everyone to remain exactly where they were. Sitting unnoticed in a dimly lit corner booth was Elias Sterling, a notoriously reclusive technology pioneer who rarely attended these ostentatious Silicon Valley events. The elderly magnate leaned forward, resting his hands on a polished wooden cane while fixing his sharp gaze entirely on Maya. He possessed a legendary reputation for destroying fraudulent startups and building genuine empires based on rigorous truth. Elias demanded that the billionaire stop shouting and allow the girl to finish her structural analysis of the investment phrasing. He observed how the child maintained her composure under immense pressure, noting that her critique of the complex foreign syntax was absolutely flawless. The retired titan recognized a rare intellect forged in hardship rather than expensive private schools. He found her complete lack of intimidation deeply fascinating for someone so young. He challenged Julian to disprove her grammatical translation rather than relying on aggressive bluster to save face. The room remained completely paralyzed as the balance of power violently shifted from the wealthy predator to the impoverished waitress's daughter. Maya did not flinch under the intense scrutiny of the world's most powerful financial minds. She simply folded her arms and waited for the exposed billionaire to defend his fraudulent business terminology. The silence stretched painfully, exposing the absolute void of knowledge behind Julian's expensive tailored suit. Elias Sterling tapped his cane once against the floor, signaling his profound approval of the analytical trap the young girl had effortlessly constructed. Maya kept her posture perfectly straight, proving that true intellectual authority requires absolutely no wealth to command absolute respect in a room full of arrogant men. Julian, completely consumed by a humiliated rage, slams a thick stack of documents encoded in ancient characters onto the nearest cocktail table. The loud smack of heavy paper against marble shatters the lingering tension in the ballroom. He refuses to let a 10-year-old girl dismantle his meticulously crafted reputation in front of Silicon Valley's most powerful venture capitalists. His face is pale with a dangerous mix of anger and desperation as he rips the leather binding off the dossier. He aggressively taps his finger against pages completely covered in dense, archaic calligraphy mixed with complex numerical grids. He loudly declares that if this little waitress's daughter is truly a linguistic prodigy, she must decode the proprietary cipher resting right in front of her. Julian boasts that these specific files contain the master key to an unprecedented offshore asset merger. He arrogantly proclaims that his company's top-tier supercomputers have been running complex decryption algorithms for 3 consecutive weeks without successfully translating the core financial ledger. He challenges her to read the main sequence out loud, betting his entire professional standing that she will immediately fail and expose herself as a pathetic fraud. The surrounding investors inch closer, forming a tight circle around the impromptu interrogation, while Elias Sterling watches with intense, calculating eyes. Maya steps up to the polished table without displaying a single ounce of fear or hesitation. She completely ignores the billionaire's venomous taunts and focuses all her attention entirely on the exposed pages. The documents initially appear to be a collection of classic Edo period poetry verses beautifully handwritten in sweeping strokes. However, her grandfather had rigorously trained her to look past superficial elegance and identify hidden structural anomalies. She leans over the documents, analyzing the strange repetitive patterns governing the placement of specific syllables and the unnatural spacing between the stanzas. The child quickly recognizes that the poetic rhythm is intentionally broken to accommodate a sophisticated substitution cipher. She traces the intricate lines with her small index finger, mentally converting the ancient characters into modern numerical sequences based on a foundational cryptographic key. As the translation forms in her brilliant mind, a chilling realization washes over her. This elaborate manuscript has absolutely nothing to do with any legitimate corporate merger or technological innovation. Maya lifts her head and turns her steady gaze away from the enraged billionaire, looking directly toward Elias Sterling instead. Her voice remains perfectly clear and unwavering as she announces the terrifying truth hidden within the intricate calligraphy. She explicitly states that the documents do not outline a business acquisition, but rather serve as a detailed operational manual for a massive systemic money laundering syndicate. Gasps erupt from the wealthy crowd as the young girl meticulously explains how the beautiful, poetic verses actually correspond to specific banking routing numbers and hidden offshore shell companies. She points to a particular stanza demonstrating how it instructs operatives to chop massive sums of illicit funds into untraceable microtransactions flowing through phantom cryptocurrency exchanges. Maya reads the specific translated directives aloud, exposing a global network designed to permanently evade federal financial oversight and defraud international tax authorities. The opulent ballroom plunges into an icy, paralyzed silence as the sheer magnitude of the criminal enterprise is laid bare by a child in a worn cotton dress. The wealthy investors who had previously eagerly courted Julian now instinctively back away from him, treating the billionaire like a highly contagious disease. They realize with horrifying clarity that their previous investments might already be permanently tainted by this sprawling illegal operation. Julian stands completely frozen, his confident posture collapsing into a pathetic display of absolute terror. His jaw drops and his eyes dart frantically around the room, searching for a sympathetic face, but finding only profound disgust and immediate condemnation. The wail of police sirens tears through the quiet atmosphere of the secluded mansion. Red and blue emergency lights instantly flood the grand ballroom, casting long, frantic shadows across the terrified faces of the wealthy investors. The heavy mahogany double doors burst open as a team of armed federal officers swarms the opulent space, securing every exit within seconds. A tall man wearing a sharp charcoal suit detaches himself from the panicked crowd where he had been quietly observing the entire evening. He casually reaches inside his tailored jacket and produces a gleaming gold badge identifying himself as Special Agent Kenji of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He walks deliberately toward the center table, where the encoded documents still lie scattered across the polished marble. Kenji looks directly at Julian Vane, whose face has drained of all color, leaving him looking like a hollow shell of his former arrogant self. The federal agent explains in a loud, commanding voice that his specialized financial crimes task force has been rigorously investigating the offshore anomalies of this specific venture capital firm for nearly 2 years. However, the Bureau constantly lacked the definitive cryptographic key required to secure a federal arrest warrant, because the billionaire kept his most damning operational ledgers entirely offline, written in obscure feudal calligraphy to evade digital surveillance. Kenji turns his respectful gaze toward Maya, explicitly stating that her brilliant public translation just provided the precise probable cause necessary to legally execute this immediate tactical raid. Hearing the inescapable reality of his impending doom, Julian completely loses his remaining composure and descends into pathetic desperation. He frantically reaches into his breast pocket, pulling out a leather-bound checkbook and a heavy gold pen. His hands shake violently as he hastily scribbles the words, $10 million across the premium paper, tearing the slip out with a loud rip. He drops to his knees right in front of the 10-year-old girl, shoving the staggering financial offer toward her small hands. Julian begs Maya to publicly retract her previous statements and simply tell the federal authorities that she was making up a silly childhood story to seek attention. He promises her exhausted mother a lifetime of unimaginable luxury if they simply walk away and let his highly paid lawyers handle the authorities. Sarah Miller instinctively steps forward to protect her daughter, but Maya gently holds her ground, remaining entirely unbothered by the astronomical sum fluttering right in front of her face. The young girl looks down at the desperate billionaire, noting how quickly his supposedly superior intellect crumbled when faced with actual, severe legal consequences. She plainly states that his dirty offshore money might be able to purchase luxurious estates and compliant politicians, but it cannot ever buy back the basic human dignity he so casually destroyed tonight. Maya refuses the bribe without a single ounce of hesitation, solidifying the absolute destruction of his fraudulent corporate empire. Agent Kenji steps rapidly between them, snatching the worthless check from the air and tossing it aside before forcefully pulling the disgraced tech titan to his feet. The sharp metallic click of the heavy steel handcuffs, locking securely around Julian's wrists, echoes loudly throughout the paralyzed ballroom. Local news media crews who had been anonymously tipped off about the high-profile raid suddenly breach the main foyer perimeter, flashing blinding camera lights to capture the shocking spectacle. The self-proclaimed master of the Silicon Valley universe is roughly escorted out the front door with his head bowed in ultimate shame. The television cameras relentlessly document his humiliating perp walk, broadcasting the monumental downfall of a corrupt billionaire to the entire world as his carefully constructed reality completely shatters. Sarah stands quietly beside her brave daughter, watching the dramatic culmination of a night that permanently altered their previously invisible lives. The arrogant predator is finally loaded into a waiting federal transport vehicle. The next morning, the sun rises over the San Francisco Bay with a beauty unlike any other day. The harsh reality of minimum wage catering shifts completely vanishes from the lives of the Miller family. Sarah permanently folds her stained white apron, discarding the physical exhaustion and relentless indignity that previously defined her grueling existence. The mother and daughter pack their few modest belongings, leaving the dilapidated San Jose apartment behind for a significantly brighter reality. Elias Sterling honors the silent promise he formulated during the chaotic aftermath of the federal raid. The retired technology magnate bypasses traditional bureaucratic delays to legally establish a fully funded philanthropic trust, dedicating his vast financial resources to a revolutionary educational initiative named directly after Arthur Miller. The wealthy pioneer recognizes that genuine intellectual brilliance often starves in the forgotten corners of modern society, while fraudulent arrogance thrives under the brightest spotlights. This newly formed academic institution actively seeks out gifted children currently trapped in impoverished neighborhoods, providing them with absolute economic security to pursue rigorous historical and linguistic research. Sarah proudly accepts a dignified leadership position, directing the Community Outreach Division of the massive foundation. She finally experiences a professional environment where her profound empathy and unwavering work ethic command genuine respect rather than cruel aristocratic mockery. Maya now possesses unlimited access to the most prestigious global archival libraries, completely free from the suffocating daily pressure of sheer survival. The 10-year-old prodigy no longer needs to hide her extraordinary abilities in a damp basement or study complex cryptography by the dim light of a melting candle. She stands confidently inside the grand mahogany library of the new campus, gently tracing the polished brass letters of her grandfather's name engraved prominently on the entrance plaque. She quietly reflects on the monumental events that successfully dismantled a deeply corrupt corporate empire, using nothing but ancient ink and precise grammatical syntax. The ultimate value of this extraordinary journey reveals itself clearly through the perceptive eyes of the young girl. Maya looks out toward the glittering technological hubs dotting the California coastline, fully recognizing the profound universal lesson her experience offers to anyone facing seemingly insurmountable odds. She understands perfectly that boundless arrogance and stolen wealth can rapidly construct a dazzling, towering castle of impressive illusions meant to intimidate the vulnerable masses. However, she knows that only the absolute, unvarnished truth serves as the indestructible structural foundation, keeping those grand fortresses from inevitably collapsing into worthless dust. Maya smiles softly while holding one of the salvaged Edo period texts, whispering a final resolute statement into the quiet room, affirming that genuine knowledge remains the ultimate equalizer, capable of terrifying the most untouchable modern tyrants. She boldly declares that mastering the truth will permanently liberate the invisible working class from the heavy chains of silent oppression, ensuring that absolutely no brilliant human mind will ever be unfairly forced into the dark, forgotten shadows of modern society ever again, securing a truly magnificent legacy for future generations.